we will open up the Architectural Board of Review for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024. If we could do roll call, please.
Thank you. I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Anderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Here.
Board Member Black,
Here.
Board Member Six,
Here.
Board Member Sovereign.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move into general business and starting with public comment. So any member of the public may address the board for up to 2 minutes on any subject that is not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I will start with in-person public comment. At this time, I have no slips for general public comment, but if anyone wishes to make a comment, they may fill out a slip and bring it to me. And I see no one in the audience moving to do so, so we will move on to virtual public comment for general comment. And I do not see any hands raised for this, and we did not receive any correspondence for general public comment. So at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you. We will close public comment and move on to the approval of the minutes from the ABR meeting on March 18th, 2024.
I'll move to approve those minutes. Were you going to review them at all, staff? Otherwise, I'll just move to approve.
No, the full board minutes are good to go.
Fine.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Six?
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we will move to the approval of the consent calendar from March 25th, 2024.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. We had 2 items. Item A, 401 West Los Olivos Street. Proposal to construct a 146-square-foot wood fence trash enclosure on a 252-square-foot concrete pad. The staff hearing officer granted approval of setback modifications to allow the enclosure to be located within the required front and interior setback on February 7th, 2024. And the project received project design approval and final approval with the comment that they should add a 2x4 top cap on fence of material sympathetic to the existing texture and painted to match existing, and the project compatibility findings were made. Item B, 2219 Bath Street, proposal to enclose a second floor roof overhang, replace rooftop mechanical equipment, remove storage on first floor and replace with a planter, add 1 parking space and 10 bicycle parking spaces. And the project received project design approval with the following comments. 1, the board looks forward to the solution of the various colors of the brick face. 2, the detailing of awning must A, not conflict with the north building entry arch. B, the back member must be raised away from the block surface to pass the proud window trim. And C, provide an elegant, less boxy fascia to the new eyebrow. 3, the width of the new window in the south elevation at the new enclosed area shall match existing and appreciate the full width between pilasters. 4, the board looks forward to window and stair details. 5, suggestion to rethink the arrangement of bike parking for better access. And 6, the project compatibility findings were made.
Okay. Do we have
I
a
make a motion to approve.
I'll second that. Let's take a vote. Oh,
Chair Anderson, I could find no architectural drawings for 2219 Bath Street, try as I might on the website, so I will abstain from voting.
Okay, we will take a vote. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Six?
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we will move to announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. Do we have anything from staff?
No announcements.
Okay. And any subcommittee reports? Okay. Seeing none, we will close general business and move on to item 1. This is a new item for concept review. 205 Anacapa Street. This is a proposal for tenant improvements to Pally Wine Company. The improvements include a 159 square foot demolition and 476 square foot addition at Building A, replacement of the existing trash enclosure with a new trash enclosure, infill of a curb cut along Anacapa Street to conform with city standards, replacement of the parking lot with a new covered outdoor seating area, hardscape and landscaping, bicycle parking, demolition of an unpermitted exterior deck and shade structure, and associated minor exterior improvements, including exterior paint color. Approval of a coastal development permit by the staff hearing officer is required. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project will require compliance with the project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. Is the applicant here? Okay. So we're waiting for,
The important part.
yeah.
Let's start there.
While we're waiting, I can make a couple staff
Okay,
comments.
great.
And
Thank
then
you.
I'll have you reintroduce yourself into the microphone in just a moment. So on behalf of the case planner, Pilar Plummer, I have a couple comments about the project. So as you know, it's here for concept review, comments only, and your motion should include that the project should be continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer, assuming, or if you are okay with the design, and the staff hearing officer will approve the coastal development permit. And also just some information that the project is in the overlay of AB 2097, which means they do not need to provide any vehicle parking for the project, which is why the existing parking is proposed to be replaced with outdoor seating areas associated with the wine tasting use. So just some background information for your board.
Thank you, that was helpful. Well, should we wait a little bit longer? I think. Mm-mm. No.
There he is. Come on up, Dan. You're on.
So yeah, we've read in your project, and the staff gave us an update of some of the processing. So if you guys would like to introduce yourselves and walk us through your project, you have 15 minutes.
Good. I'm Dan Weber, principal. Thanks, Lauren. I'm Dan Weber, principal at Anacapa.
I'm Tony Schoenhart, the design director at Anacapa.
Yeah, Rob Madej, Bosky Landscape Architecture.
All right, so the proposed development that we're looking at is currently made up of 3 buildings, building A, B, and C, inclusive of an existing trash enclosure. And I'll kind of skip ahead here to get to that. Here you can see the existing condition. It's all masonry buildings with a parking lot, which is currently being used for overflow dining experience and outdoor dining experience. Obviously, that's holdover from the pandemic. What we are proposing is a remodel of buildings A and B, which are these 2 buildings over here on the left side. And then that space, which was previously an office and trash enclosure, expanding that slightly by approximately 134 square feet to encompass restrooms and bike storage. And then we're also proposing an update to the exterior dining experience, which would be a covered shade structure, inclusive of a relocated trash enclosure. Let me jump ahead. Do you want to speak to the landscape slightly? Okay. So here you can see the addition to the structures. That's the 134 square feet. The use of the space, and I'm going to go to this plan. The use of the space is going to be a tasting room. So this would be the primary tasting experience, page north. Next, we have a little bit of like a wine library. So this is a visual element. Private tasting room, dishwashing station, restrooms, and then long-term bike storage here. Outdoor dining experiences. Page north, you have the covered area with landscape features kind of surrounding it to soften those edges, and then the trash enclosure kind of central to that. Building C, which you see hatched here, will not be touched. There's a slight modification to this door swing. Other than that, it would just be exterior paint. Roof plan. So here you can see the extent of that shade cover with larger openings for kind of a signature tree. And then we've also included here, I'll show you one more slide. This is a representation kind of to give you the look and feel of that structure. We were attempting to create something that was a little bit warmer, more inviting, but also provided obviously some thermal comfort in the summer here. So providing shade and just a cozier environment at night at that corner. And then with landscaping, which would surround the entire perimeter with, again, some feature elements like that tree that you see in this image. You want to speak to it?
Yeah, and there's not too much more to offer here on this illustrative landscape plan, except to point out this notion of the idea of wrapping the shade structure and helping create more of an outdoor room from the streetscape. And then secondly, within the space, there's going to be a variety of plantings, whether they're in ground or above grade, to create more of an outdoor room feeling, some smaller spaces within that larger space. As noted, there is the idea of a signature tree centered and kind of puncturing through that, through the new canopy structure. Right now, it's all very conceptual. We don't have a proposed landscape palette, and we'll be working with the clients and developing that over the next couple reviews, and we'll come back with a more full landscape palette. But the idea is that we'll be working with the civil engineer on our stormwater. Some of these planters will have to be stormwater ready, and so as those pieces are fleshed out, no pun intended, we'll also be able to select the right plant palette for that.
Do you want to just walk us through some of the more solid elements and what materials you're proposing on those?
Sure. So the three existing structures are primarily CMU block, and portions are brick. They've all been painted out. So we're proposing to keep that and just update the paint, so keeping in kind with what was there. The only additional materials are going to be plaster, timber, and a terracotta screening element, like a breeze block. So the breeze block will be used for the vertical surfaces as an infill in between a heavy timber structure. So trying to lean into a more like crafted type of architecture. The horizontal elements will all be timber. So the main screening, horizontal screening, will be timber. And the groundscape is intended to be a combination of like gravel, DG, and concrete. So a combination of hard and more porous surfaces. New door and window systems are intended to be wood as well. Again, something warmer to connect those two elements in kind. And this is kind of the palette, the look and the feel for glass, the door, window systems, and the framing. Right now, the client's kind of leaning towards this warmer terracotta breeze block. And obviously, I think this image right here is indicative of that look and feel. So light palette, kind of those like Santa Barbara beiges, and then obviously using a lot of the greens that are coming from the planting themselves, which surround the building and kind of occupy that internal dining space.
Okay, is that your presentation? Anything
Anything
else?
else to add?
Yeah, no, maybe if there's one thing I would add, it's, this is the funk zone. I think y'all probably know the funk zone pretty well, and there's all kinds of different architecture down there, ranging from traditional Spanish stuff to really cool modern stuff. And, some mid-century modern. So we wanted this to be distinctive and, you know, part of that eclectic funk zone fabric. And it's a really low-scale project, very low intensity. So we wanted it to be comfortable and cool and kind of fit in with that vibrant, pedestrian-oriented neighborhood that's that's been developing in the funk zone.
Okay. Great, thank you. We will now open public comment for this item.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I have no slips for this particular item. However, if you wish to make a public comment, you may fill out a slip and bring it to me. And I don't see anyone doing so, so we will move on to virtual comment. If you wish to make a virtual comment, please raise your hand. At this time, I see no hands raised, and on this particular item, we did not receive written correspondence. So at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
All right, we will close public comment and go to questions from the board. Board Member 6, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Chair. I don't have many questions. Is there any new portions of the west wall that will be, existing west wall that will be rebuilt, and a concern about matching old and new?
At the moment, we're not intending to.
It's all
replace that. We're
existing
trying to keep the in-kind, yeah.
to the height
Keep it
and so
existing.
forth?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And I noticed for instance, your trellis plan, 17-foot span for your lattice is an incredibly long span. Do you have a material in mind, or is that going to develop into something more with more realistic spans?
It's a great question. We are intending for it to be heavy timber still.
Even the slats?
Even the slats, yeah. And we're working with the structural engineer to lock in exactly what the span is and how we're going to do that, whether it be like a glue lam or some type of composite. That might also be, but the aesthetic will be timber.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Whalen.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. A couple of questions on the plan. Is there a weight station somewhere in the plan
Oh, wait.
where the wait staff coordinates their business?
I was thinking like weighing.
I was thinking lifting weights.
That
All
too.
good
bench press.
questions.
In a wine bar, that's a first.
We currently, in the lower left is where the dishwashing station is, and then the long-term bike storage is also where staff can hang coats and things of that nature, but there's not a waiting station, so to speak,
Per se.
specific, yeah.
That's what, in my experience, my salad days in the restaurant business, there was always a wait station. So one of the more unusual things about your plan are the trash dumpsters are in the middle of the plan. How did that come about that they landed there?
Another great question. They initially were a little bit closer to building C, but due to the desire to activate that lower space as a dining space, I think what we're interested in is finding a solution, albeit unorthodox, to put them in the middle. One of the big concerns for us is how do we mitigate smell and anything else, and
Drips and
all
gross stuff.
of the same concerns.
The tracks.
The drips, exactly. All the same concerns we have. At the moment, that is the location that our client felt most comfortable with. So we're actively pursuing solutions to mitigate all of those concerns.
So
which
it's
we
safe
also
to
have.
assume it's a solid enclosure,
Yes.
unlike your more diaphanous screens, right?
Correct.
And
Yep.
it's open to the sky, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it might. I could see a world where where they weren't rolled out to the west and then out to the street. Maybe that there's an internal circulation corridor inside the trash enclosure, and they're just rolled out the end directly to the south
Yeah.
onto Yananali. That might be an improvement. Something
Okay.
like that.
There's some, and I won't get into the orchestration of doing all three at once. but-
Oh yeah.
So there are, if I read the plan correctly, there are 3 entries for the public, 2 off of Yananali and the one into the, off of Anacapa, right?
So we do have 1, 2. There's a third here, and if you want to consider that, this is a little more private. I think, if a guest was familiar with this space, you certainly could come through this
But
back entry.
you'd come off of Yananali at the other two.
This is where we're intending,
Yes,
really, for most guests to come through.
So I'm
here
reading
off
the plan
Yananali.
correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's see, on to some landscape questions. Even though you prefaced your presentation that you haven't picked a palette, some of the elevations get very specific. So you want to talk about that, and there's also an alternative landscape for the courtyard. So you're obviously thinking about several things. Any strong notion about plants yet, especially for the feature tree?
Yes, thank you. Do you mind flipping to the landscape plan? Yeah, thank you. So the elevations that were, renderings that were prepared, that was by the Anacapa team, since that has been reviewed by the clients, part of their mission statement is about sustainability and native plants, and they're looking very holistically at their brand. So their input is less emphasis on these structural, architectural, Southwest kind of style plantings, and more in the California palette. So there's going to be a transition to that, and our next go around we'll bring some renderings of how that'll look and feel, because I feel like there's going to be a bit more softness to these elevations than what you see in that rendering. Along those lines, I don't know what that central courtyard tree is going to be yet, but that'll all work itself out in the coming days. As you can see here, we were also thinking about the proximity of the trash enclosure as it relates to the outdoor lounging experience. So we're trying to build some buffer spaces. Our plan has some additional planters here that wasn't visible on the architectural site plan. And the alternate is really kind of speaking to just that notion. If you see the alternate on the lower left-hand side, the idea is we could maybe kind of enhance that corridor of utility that Dan was speaking about, and have some at-grade or above-grade planters that could better separate those outdoor seating areas.
Once the trash bins sort themselves out. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Board Member Black?
Let's see, a couple things. I just wanted to be clear about the low masonry walls, where you've got openings from the sidewalk looking into the dining spaces. So those walls would be, at least from your rendering, look like, what, 42 inches, that kind of thing, I'm guessing. So there's an opening there. I see that,
Yeah.
that elevation, obviously, which I like. Because then there's at least some connection with the pedestrian traffic and what's going on inside there. And then there's another opening on the east side, I'm guessing, as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, those lower walls are meant to be feature walls for serving two purposes. Well, three. One is signage. The second is
Sure.
they don't want people passing through, obviously, those openings, depending
Right.
on what the planting, how dense that is. And then the third is they're also intended to be leaners, so that people can engage with the sidewalk. So you'd come up, grab your glass of wine, and you'd be able to stand there and kind of,
Huh.
have that conversation and look over the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ABC also has some requirements that we limit the control points in and out of the areas serving alcohol. So they want to keep those to only a couple points.
I'm not real clear when you talk about terracotta screen. What is that? Do you have
Can you zoom in? Maybe can you
do you have a
zoom in?
close-up photograph of like a typical material? That one?
I'm gonna try to zoom
Yeah,
in. as
this
best I can. Oh,
terracotta is
I don't
like
know what we
just
brought
just like the clay tiles that are on a Spanish style roof.
Yeah.
This is a traditional Spanish revival style material. You'll see this in old buildings around town,
Oh, I know
just
what
these
the-
old clay tiles.
Yeah, I get that.
Exactly.
Okay, it's that. It's
Yeah.
that. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it.
And it'll be terracotta colored, I'm guessing?
That's the intent, yeah.
Okay. Let's see, what else? Landscape-wise, are you anticipating new trees out in the parkway on Yananali and Anacapa? I can't remember whether is there a parkway there now?
There's a parkway.
Are there trees
On
there?
Yananali, there are 3 trees. And they're It's actually interesting. They're all different. So much for street tree plantings and suggestions. And on Anacapa Street, there's an existing magnolia of quite some stature, so we're not planning to remove any of the street trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the wall around the trash enclosure, how high is that?
Those walls would be to the underside of this pergola, so full height to the pergola, like 9-foot walls.
Oh,
Quite
okay.
Substantial.
Okay, so yeah, I had this notion of people walking by and looking in and seeing the trash, so you won't be seeing it at all. will
No,
you? So,
no.
okay, good.
Completely
And
concealed.
then just a final question, what material on the ground are you going to have where there is currently parking lot? Is it just going to be asphalt? Are you going to resurface it somehow, or?
The intent is it would be resurfaced, so there'll be a combination of, in the areas of planting, it would be more of a gravel surface, and then using concrete in the other areas, like a ground concrete to blend in, so it still has some texture and scale to it.
Got it. Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Those are my questions.
Okay, Board Member Soffern?
Yeah, has there been, because like any thought about lighting and how this impacts, because it's an outdoor space, but then, can you talk about that at all?
I might throw it over to you as well, but the lighting for the outdoor spaces is definitely tended to be kind of dim and subdued, with a heavy emphasis on the vegetation. So leaning into more like tree-focused lighting, and then also having kind of like that small twinkle light. There's something about the existing space, obviously, which is very temporal and temporary, which we don't love, but there is like a charm to these smaller kind of elements that twinkle. In addition, we're also looking at using more of these surface-mounted lanterns to make it feel very much like an outdoor experience and not a kind of overhead light indoor experience. So to differentiate them, it's more about focused like moments of lighting between the landscape, and I will call them decorative elements as a strategy.
I don't think I have any follow-up questions, so any further questions from the board? All right, let's move into comments. Board Member 6. They're here for concept, so we will make a motion at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice plan and architecture. I don't have any problem with it at all, and just and not in our purview where people are going to park with those lost parking spaces, but you know, that's the game we're playing these days. But it's a very nice plan, and I look forward to seeing it progress.
Okay, Vice Chair Whalen?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. A couple of comments about the curb plantings, especially on Anacapa. It's going to receive a lot of pedestrian traffic, so please allow for that and don't plan it out. So that's the first thing that will get trampled. And then, as Member 6 alluded to, be sure that there's an adequate opening for this central tree. I'm sure you won't overlook that. Is this desert palette appropriate for Santa Barbara and the pedestrian nature? By that, the elevation implied there are a lot of spiky, thorny things, and I'm sure you don't want to. And as much as you want to create a barrier, you don't want to injure people if they do try to break a path through there. The bike parking on Anacapa, it really conflicts with vehicular passenger, you know, the one I'm talking about. So you might expand the bike parking lot that would be to the south rather than that one on the north. Certainly the architectural expression is very elegant. How does this reflect the funk zone, and is this funky enough? I mean, it's first quality Palm Springs modernism. I'm just wondering how well it will reflect the values of the funk zone. Thank you.
Board Member Black?
Yeah, I think it's a nice project. I look forward to seeing it. Certainly an improvement over what's there now, so I'm looking forward to the redesign. Yeah, and looking forward to seeing the landscape too. So, but you were talking about, well, there was a comment about desert plants, but really you're talking about trying to steer toward a more native palette, right? Yeah, I mean, they're small spaces, so obviously it's going to be small plan. But yeah, I think it's quite nice.
Okay, Board Member Soffren?
No comments. I think it's a well-designed project so far, like where you guys are. I think you're headed in a great direction. And I think I'm excited to see when you come back.
Cool. And yeah, my comments are similar. I'd lean towards the California native plant palette versus the cacti. And I think the material palette for the architecture is very nice. It does resemble a bit of Palm Springs, but I think there can be some tweaking with even just looking at the different terracotta colors of the breeze block and how would that look with the other materials that you're looking at using, and maybe try to steer a little bit more towards Santa Barbara or more funky. I don't know, one or the other maybe. Otherwise, the plan is great, and yeah, I don't see any major issues with why it couldn't go to the staff hearing officer. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that?
So it sounds like 3 of the 5 of us are, well, I included that there should be some tweaks and funkiness in it. I hear 2, perhaps, and maybe it's not in the bones of it, but
Right.
in the details.
Yeah.
So it would be, have more fun. It's fun now, but have more fun.
Yeah. Yes.
We'll definitely take that.
Okay, so I'll attempt to make a motion, and you guys can all join in during discussion. So I'll move for continue indefinitely to the staff hearing officer with the following comments: that the board finds the plan nicely laid out, that the material palette can be studied further to lean towards the funk zone or lean towards Santa Barbara style. That the landscape palette should lean towards the California natives. And we look forward to the detailing. Simple enough.
An indefinite continuance to
I
staff
believe I
hearing
did,
officer?
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So did anyone second that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Anything under discussion? Nope, all right.
Perfect. We will take a vote. Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
Board Member Sovereign,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great, thank you very much.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks a lot.
See you next time.
Chair Anderson, pardon the interruption. At this point, I'd recommend a 5-minute recess so we can wait for the applicant team of item 2. And the item isn't scheduled till 3:45, so I expect we have a few more public commenters coming as well. So if we could take a 5-minute recess.
Sure thing. Resume our meeting, and unfortunately I have to recuse myself because of a scheduling conflict, so Vice Chair Whalen is going to be taking over, but you were in great hands, so.
So the item 2 is for 102 West De La Guerra Street. Does staff have any comments, or should I read the proposal then?
Staff does have a couple comments, and our case planner, Barbara Burkhart, is here to introduce the item.
Well, I'll read the introduction in. The proposal is to construct a new 5-story, 40-unit residential apartment building and 4-story self-storage facility with a basement level mixed-use development on a 77-space parking lot. The site is located within the priority housing overlay and central business district. The project would utilize AB 2097, the city's average unit size density program, and state density bonus law. No parking is proposed pursuant to AB 2097. a concession for height restrictions, and a waiver for open yard standards as allowed under SDBL would be requested. The property is adjacent to the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. The proposed project is adjacent to 101 West Canon Perdido Street, the historic telephone building constructed in 1927, and across the street from 115 West De La Guerra Street, an historic Spanish colonial revival style building designed by noted architects Edwards and Plunkett. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. The project will require compliance with the project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines. With that, Barbara?
Thank you. I'm just here to assist Ms. Ernest today in case you have any questions for staff, because I did prepare what we call the pre-application review team letter for this proposal, so I'm familiar with it. And then just in general, I just want to remind you, it's a concept review level, so we're looking for your comments on broad issues at this point in time. We're looking for comments on site planning, general architectural style, and the project's relationship to its site and surrounding buildings. In terms of the adjacent historic resources, the design guidelines state that a balance between those resources and the new construction should be maintained. So we're also looking to you for any comments in terms of that aspect of the project. This board will be tasked with ensuring that any new development is compatible with and appropriately sensitive to those resources. So just wanted to kind of frame your review today in terms of those things. And with that, I'll hand it back over. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And with that,
Chair Whalen, I have a question for staff. She said that the sensitivity to historic structures was, the goal was to achieve a balance between the adjacent structures and the new structure. What is it, 113, 115 De La Guerra is a very petite building. What do you mean by, how does balance in that context, what does it mean?
It is a bit vague. Thank you for the question. I don't know exactly how to answer it. There are more specific guidelines that would apply to the project, so we'll ask that the applicant team design with those in mind, and when they come with a full application, a formal application, be prepared to make that argument.
So it's a more sophisticated meaning of the word balance than just size?
Yes, I think in general, you're going to need to look and comment on the project's compatibility with the neighborhood in general, and certainly size, bulk, and scale is part of that. Architectural style is part of that.
Yes, and in particular the historic building on the opposite side of the street. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
well, with that, I think we can have our applicant team introduce themselves and make your presentation.
Go ahead.
Brian Cornell.
And Greg Wrights, the project applicant. I want to start, and then Brian's going to do most of the talking, but I wanted to kind of give the sequence of events that ended up with this project. The first thing is that Frontier building, the historic building built in 1927 was is called the telephone building. It was the Santa Barbara Telephone Company, then it was GTE and Verizon, now it's Frontier. And over those years, when they were originally using that building, there were operators sitting in there plugging away, connecting calls. Now it's digital switches, that a whole floor of people is now replaced by a little switch, 5 by 5. So
copper wire about that.
Yeah, and they've got fiber optics running into the building. So their footprint shrank. And so Frontier sold off basically half the building to us. In the process of looking at that building and what we could do with that space and whether we wanted to buy it, they had a deed restriction not allowing in a hotel. There's lead contaminated soils, so we couldn't do a residential adaptive use. And there's no demand for office in downtown right now. There's way more office space than we need. So changing it to office didn't work. The only solution that worked to purchase and renovate the building with was self-storage. So that is what we proposed, and that's what we're working on in that existing building. But in order for us to be able to make that work, we need more self-storage. So there's not enough space in that building to make a business out of self-storage. So that's when we started thinking, well, we'll build on the parking lot. So we bought the parking lot with the building, or with half of the building, condos in the building, at the same time. And so the business plan was self-storage in the main building, self-storage on the lot, and then it starts to make sense. That building is old. Frontier has not maintained it. It needs a new roof. It needs new elevators. It needs new paint. Asbestos has to come out of it. The whole electrical system needs to be replaced. Lots of money has to go into that building.
Well,
So
we just went to HLC for accessibility at the
and
entrance.
accessibility as well. So there's nothing you can do to renovate that building without the complementary use on the lot. So that's where we're at with that self-storage. And then, but we didn't want to use that land for self-storage because there's a potential for housing. So we're building the full complement of housing on that lot as well. And what I got really excited about was by being able to put the self-storage on part of the lot, we're building smaller units on the front of the lot, and those units are going to be smaller and more affordable because they're using up less of the value of the lot. We're sharing the value with the self-storage. So the self-storage on the middle of the lot is really subsidizing both the historic renovation and lower cost housing on the front. So for that, makes it a really exciting project for me because we're meeting so many needs with one project. More affordable housing. There's an undersupply of self-storage. People are converting garages to ADUs and not replacing that storage. New housing is being built in downtown, generating more demand, especially at Paseo Nuevo. They're proposing 500 units right across the street. So there's an unmet demand, which is driving up costs for self-storage, which means higher cost of living in Santa Barbara. So it's exciting for me, and I'm glad to have Brian and Bob on the design team to help make it look like a building that we love to have.
So this definitely is concept, so we're looking for your thoughts on this. A lot is not developed, but the basic concept is to just to emphasize how the site works. What is really nice is that there is this alley that runs between De La Vina and Chapala. And so all of the loading and unloading for the storage in both buildings is able to happen completely mid-block right here, which is kind of ideal. So there'll be no access from De La Guerra. The only thing that happens, the only connection at De La Guerra, as you'll see, is basically the exiting system for the storage building. The little building across the street, I should mention, I don't know what the status of it is, but I know it went through a redevelopment, and so it was proposed. Did it come to ABR, or? Yes. Yeah. I'm a little surprised this is in ABR. As a parcel, because we did the project right across the street at 121 West De La Guerra. So, let's see if I can, how do I go to the next sheet? Let's try that. There we go. So, as Greg mentioned, we're over actually the allowable density for the parcels, so that's why we're using the state bonus density. The base density is 37 units. One of the really good things about this project using state bonus density is we're going to have 2 very low income units and 4 moderate income units out of the 40. But they are small units, so as Greg said, the intent is for these to really be workforce units. So we placed it obviously on De La Guerra. I've pushed it relatively tight to the street. It is held back pursuant to the pedestrian master plan, so I think we give up a couple of 2.5 feet of frontage for that. And I do have this little entry element, which, by the way, is at this point very undeveloped and crude, and certainly welcome your comments on that. But the point is to do some kind of a nice little traditional entry piece that speaks to De La Guerra. So then the problem came to, okay, well, what do we do with this storage building? I was not inclined to create a sort of a faux building, faux architecture with buildings, which they do with a lot of these storage buildings, as we see on the freeway on the way out towards Fairview. There's that sort of a thing. So my idea is to clad this and make this a living wall, a green wall that basically the mid-block becomes this green mass. And, hence that's why Bob is here, because we've had a lot of discussions about, okay, how do you do that? I've got a 45-foot high by 184-foot long wall. One side is facing basically southwest. One is facing southeast. And so that is going to be the real problem. But certainly what we want to talk to you about today is, is that an idea that you feel is appropriate? I personally think that by the time we add some trees and the planting along both sides, that it's an opportunity to be very honest with what this is, and in the long run, really create something that's going to make a lot more sense than, again, creating just faux openings in what is a storage structure. So I think with that, I will, just to be clear, the storage building does have a basement. It will go to a maximum height of 45 feet. And then we are taking the residential 5 stories up to the 60-foot height limit. I think with that, I'd like to let Bob just sort of opine on his thoughts about how do you create this living wall on this building, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thank you. So the three of us have discussed this, I won't say at length, but to a point where I think we're pretty well settled on what we think is going to work. Turns out that ivy, either Algerian ivy or English ivy, will grow up a CMU wall pretty much as high as the wall goes. And either species will grow at about 7 feet per year. So thinking 7 or 8 years, we get complete coverage. I'm looking into contract growing for large container sizes, if we can get 24-inch boxes. And by the time this building is in place, then we'll have probably a 10-foot head start on reaching the total height. Greg came up this morning with the idea of having planters at the top, at the roof, that might have plants that would spill down from the top. So we would have, growth from both sides, up and down. And with the planters from the top, we could also plant some flowering vines. So I've got a list of, I think, 5 species that would work pretty nicely, at that location. We've looked at several different options for what the vines should be, and it seems pretty clear that the ivies are the way to go. I was thinking also that we could mix variegated and green species together. So we might have, as many as 3 different tones or colors or textures. in just basically a random mixture for some variety. So that's the extent of it. Yep.
So it's, you know, the Ivy too, I mean, I've done some reading, and the Ivy is probably ideal in terms of really creating a thermal, basically a thermal envelope around this building, so it will really help to keep it cool. We have the opportunity to put solar panels on the entire roof of this, which is also going to be very beneficial, where I think we could really get this building to a net zero condition. As far as the building in front, the apartment building, I really just, obviously, it's kind of clear. I mean, I just, you know, the inspiration here was very simple, rational, walk-up apartment building that is 5 stories with some articulation of a band on the top. Again, this is right now crude and deserving of detail, but I think that it can work as an entry element. Otherwise, I think the building is just very simple and rational and appropriate, you know, within or around the El Pueblo Viejo. Finally, obviously, there are a lot of buildings right around us in the neighborhood, despite the fact that there's a 1-story historic Edwards and Plunkett across the street. You know, we've got 4 stories at the corner of Chapala and De La Guerra. We've got the Canary Hotel, which goes to 60 feet. The GTE building, or whatever it is now, goes to 60 feet. Nordstrom's as well. So there are a lot of examples of taller buildings in the neighborhood. So again, really do want your comments on this and whether we think something like this can work. So anything you want to add?
Chair Whalen, if I could interrupt quickly, your additional rendering is also pulled up
Oh.
on there if you wanted to include that in the last bit of
So
your
that's
presentation.
just my next arrow, or where would that be?
It's the other document that's open, so if you toggle over the Adobe at the bottom of the bottom panel.
Over here?
Yes, will be on the right.
Okay, yeah, so we took a shot looking the other way to give a sense of what you would see from that side. So I think that concludes our presentation.
Very good. So with that, I think we can open it to questions. Member 6.
No.
Public comment first. Yes, very good. And I'm sure we're not short for that today.
No.
Thank you, Member 6. So we'll open the floor to public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Whalen. Currently, I do have slips for those to speak. So first up, we'll have Sheila Dumong. If you could please come up to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Please make sure to turn on your mic.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Dumong, and I live at 121 West De La Guerra Street. And we don't have a lot of information that we've been able to take a look at with regard to this project, but upon looking at it, seeing the picture, it was shocking, it was surprising. Everyone in the development was pretty much dismayed. It didn't feel like it was sort of in keeping with Kernal, which is the person who was the architect of our building. And I think, you know, the size, the bulk, the scale, all of that was just really shocking and really incompatible with the rest of the neighborhood. And some of the larger buildings that have been referred to are actually not on De La Guerra and don't have this big hulking block like monolithic look to them. They have different roof lines, and there's all sorts of stuff going on, and it's also on the major corridor of Carrillo and Chapala Street, and not De La Guerra, which is our neighborhood. I have sent you a letter via email a little bit earlier. There was a lot of stuff in there. In thinking about really the affordability, we know that the density has not trickled down. The trickle-down theory of smaller units being more affordable has not panned out. And really only 6 of the units are affordable, and 4 of those units are at $90,000 a year income level or greater. So it's not really workforce housing. And I don't have much time, but there's a lot in my notes. Take a look, and we'll be participating more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have Kathleen Gu. If you'd like to approach the podium, you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Okay, hi. I'm a resident at 105 West De La Guerra, and currently I don't have any problem with the height of the building because I believe next door to my building there will be a 4-story building going up, probably either the end of this year or next year. But I did want to question about the parking situation. Since there are going to be some units that are affordable housing, where exactly are they expected to park? I don't think that was addressed yet by the applicant. So that's my question for today, and I will be continuing to attend for future reviews. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gu. At this time, we will move on to virtual comment, and I do see a hand raised, so I will give access to Kelly Bartlett. Kelly, you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I love where I live. I live at 121 West De La Guerra, and I was a recipient of affordable housing ownership program. So I'm here to stay. I'm middle class. I'm a professional worker. I pay my taxes. And keeping in the theme of the broad issues, I have some questions. How can we call 40 studios averaging 400 square feet multifamily apartments? I don't even know if 2 people can live in 400 square feet. That's less than a 2-car garage. Under the formulas that I was able to see for the low to moderate income housing, it looked like that there was an approval for 8 moderate units, but only 4 were selected. So I was curious about why that happened. And then the flood zone. Just want you all to be sure that you have considered the most recent, what are they calling it? A letter of map revision that's dated July of 2021, because that put us across the street in the flood zone due to the upgrades of the Mission Creek City of Santa Barbara projects. And it's really has been detrimental in terms of being able to sell the units, and could be. Also, since the telephone building cannot be turned residential because of environmental and toxic issues, such as lead contaminated soil, how does that affect this building, and what happens? And then, let's see, I guess I just want to have a
Pardon
better
the
understanding
interruption.
of.
There's no time remaining. However, the chair can allow you to proceed.
Yes, if you could wrap it up with the last comment, please.
Certainly, I had one other point. It was just about how the adjacent parcel comes into play with this parcel in terms of the easement and the parking. Just not real clear on that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have further comments?
Okay, I see no further hands raised on virtual public comment, so we will move on to correspondence received for this particular item. We did receive written correspondence from Joan Davidson, Agneta Albinson, Pam Tanas, and Shella Dumont. At this, we will turn it back over to you, Vice Chair Whalen.
Thank you, and I would do well to read the instructions on the wall. So now I believe we can turn to questions from the board. Mr. Six.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Let me understand, there was a notes to, in favor of Lot 1 and Lot 2. I would assume that Lot 1 is in pink and Lot 2 is in red, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the parking in Lot 1 is for, how does one use, who uses that?
There are 25 spaces on Lot 1, 12 of which are dedicated to the tenants of 101 West Cannon Perdido, so the existing building, and the other are
101, the historic building?
historic building.
Yes, okay.
So the 13 are kind of floating, just like unassigned spaces. So they are available for use for Lot 2.
So that would be for loading and unloading?
Loading and unloading. The traffic levels for storage are really low. There's very few people coming at any particular time. So we'll have some loading spaces on the site, and I don't know that those are actually shown, Brian, but
Well, there's an easement over, there's an underground storage tank here, and so that area is open to the sky all the way up, and that will serve as loading space.
Temporary, yeah.
yeah, so there's those loading spaces, and then there's a longer-term option for parking on the Lot 1
So do you
spaces.
anticipate some of those parking spaces being in use for the new residences?
I don't anticipate using them for overnight parking, but for like move-ins and deliveries and things.
All right, so, and I think it was one of the public commenters, what is the extent of the toxic environmental issues? Does it migrate to this Lot 2?
No, that was a good question, and we weren't clear about that. The lead contamination in the soil is in the rear of the telephone building, the historic building. It's confined within the gated area there, yeah, where Brian is indicating. And the reason it can't be mitigated is they have a 2-megawatt diesel generator for backup power for the telephone system, and that can't be moved. So it's
But-
on top of the contaminated soil.
So there's no issue, environmental issues on Lot 2?
Sorry, I still didn't answer that. Correct.
Okay. So I'm trying to get to the size required of the storage unit building, and, there's, obviously, if we scroll down once, there's a match line over there on the site plan. Yeah, right there. Why is that established there as opposed to being north and establishing more units? For instance, for one type of scenario of variation of mix of use?
The amount of storage shown as a complement to the amount of square footage in the existing building is the ideal amount of square footage for managing a self-storage facility.
So there's a critical mass
Yeah.
of number of units, number of
Yeah, units, square
storage
feet.
spaces,
Yeah.
yes. And if there was less, it's not economically viable.
I'm not an expert on self-storage. We aimed for the optimal size, so
Okay,
it's
and
possible that it would be suboptimal.
do you have plans now for how you're going to develop the interior of the historic building, and how many you have an idea of your pro forma, given how many storage units you would have within the historic building?
Historic building. We do. I don't have it memorized, but it's
So you do have
it's
a
on
plan?
it's around 20,000 square feet of total storage area in the existing building.
Okay. Use of parking. So, the bike parking at the north upsheet end of the self-storage, yes, that is for the residences? And why are they, and like, well, I understand why the trash would be located because of the convenience of the trash trucks, but why is the parking, so one has to go from the unit along the yellow brick road to your parking, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the
it's-
reason
it's
for
a
that?
Good question. You know, I'm not sure that I have a really good reason as opposed to why we didn't put it up here, because obviously this area, you know, could be used for storage and we could swap out bike parking over in this area. I did fail to mention that there's a large oak and also podocarpus in this corner here, so we're preserving that. But since we were putting the trash back in the back, I think we thought, you know, that we'd put the bike parking back in the back as well. But that's certainly, you know, worthy of some additional study.
Study, So, I think, Mr. Cunningham, we're planning 3 or 2 orientations, east and west, or are we also doing vines on the upsheet north?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you know, we obviously have a walkway along here. And so, you know, again, this is very conceptual, so to be honest, we haven't really thought about how it turns the corner. I think it would need to somehow turn the corner.
But you are planning on east and west?
But definitely full east and west sides, yes.
So, Mr. Cunningham, is the health and vigor of vines to 4 stories equally possible, both east and west?
Yes, it is.
They don't need sun or environment.
They're-
I've been trying to grow plants on my northeast side forever, and nothing will grow.
They will do as well on the north side, or in the sun or the shade.
Okay, so let's say that these vines grow to, what is it, the 4 stories. What would the main base, the trunk of this monster be in its diameter and away from the wall?
It's going to take a long time, but, you know, they just keep getting bigger.
And how big would the trunk be? Could it be 2 feet?
No. Not within
18?
the youngest person here's lifetime, no. You know, a foot probably would be, you know, the safe guess.
A foot, okay. So, I know that this talented architect has done many creative forms to hide mass spoken scale by radically reducing the roof, the topmost levels of a building, so you're not looking at them from any angles, typical angles that you would experience. Were there any thoughts of stringing either some or additional living units atop the self-storage structure, and or cascading, you know, having the additional story in the middle and have setbacks along the sensitive sides?
No, because there is a need for a property line, because these 2 uses need to be separated as separate property for financing purposes.
I get it, okay. But it doesn't answer the ultimate answer for the box and all the way up and all the way across is the amount, the economics of providing if we started to shave it down and on the top, it would eliminate units, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to the renderings, the southeast rendering. That shows upper, you're on that sheet right now.
Oh, so
Yeah, right there. Can we zoom up on that upper right?
maybe.
So this shows when we get beyond into the green building, there are significant trees that are reaching up to the third floor there in the rendering. Are those based on neighbors' trees or what?
No, our hope is that we can plant some trees along the property line and do indentations, but again, we haven't fully evaluated that, but that would be the intent, that we get some
Okay.
trees in there as well.
Okay, so it's in a roundabout way, I'm getting to one of my points. So the yellow brick road is only 5 feet wide, correct?
It is, that's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So you're anticipating having mature 1-foot trunk IVs?
No, we have an additional 2 feet for the planting of the ivy, in addition to the 5 feet.
Oh, that shows on the plan?
That may not be in this latest version, but that is where we are right now.
So are you anticipating, so you are anticipating widening the perimeter setback on the east side?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, from what we've actually shown here, we are going to, I'm going to make sure that we've got 3 feet on the west side, and that we have a minimum of 2 feet clear for planting. And then that walkway, we're assuming will be a permeable surface, so it's not, it doesn't have footings or anything. And then hopefully we can create some pockets, because, we can limit our width to 42 inches along that pathway and be able to get some trees at the property line. And we may have to move it a little more to accomplish all of that, but that's the goal.
Okay. So I noticed that on the section, can you describe how you're anticipating the use of the roof on the residential? I see there's quite a high header height over the last 4-story windows, in attempts to bring building mass down. Sometimes we see a plate height very close and even below the main structural floor to bring down the height of the eave. Is there any thought on that yet, or is not developed?
Well, no, I think that, the top of this building is going to be very important. We will have probably, these are obviously all small units, so these will be split systems, so the condensers will likely be on the roof. We'll likely have some solar panels on the roof. It is important, as you've heard me say before, in small units like this, that we have adequate ceiling height. So I think we've assumed 9-foot ceilings inside these. Maybe we're showing 10. Let me see what I've got here. No, we're showing 10-foot ceilings.
Well, just let's take a look at the profile just in front of the tower, and it would seem that you were right on.
Okay.
So.
You're talking about this area here?
Yeah, with the height of the lettering rooftop seems like that could at least you could have a steeper mansard and come down to and take,
Yes.
take a little out. yeah?
Absolutely.
So that kind of
Yeah.
massaging is still
Absolutely,
available?
and that again, this is very conceptual. We haven't spent a lot of time on this. This is coming to you so that we.
Yeah, I'm getting a little too specific, and I don't want to do that, but I understand now. Thanks. All right, those are my questions.
Thank you, Member Six. Member Soffren, any questions?
For the portion of the structure that's covered in the vines, what's the plan for the finished look until the vines grow? Are you just gonna paint it white?
Well, no, I mean, that's a good question. We've talked about that as well. Bob's idea actually is maybe in the interim, we think about a mural of some kind, which could be very cool, I think. Our intent is, though, for it to be a block structure. So whether we plaster that or not, I would prefer potentially not to, so that, the vine can connect to that block as well as it possibly can. But Bob's also pointed out that, we have to be sure if we are gonna think about some kind of a mural, an interim mural approach to it, we have to be sure that paint doesn't in any way prevent the plant from connecting to the wall. So these are all good questions. But I think the construction itself will be block.
Let's see, just a staff question. I just want to make sure I understand. Can you just explain the concession for height restrictions? What does that mean?
Sure. Thank you for the question. That comes with state density bonus law. So the city is required to grant this density bonus along with other incentive or concessions. So for this project, they're looking for a concession to height. And I'm thinking maybe
Open space,
yard
open
as
yard
well.
for the units, yeah.
And it's really at the applicant's discretion which concessions they want to ask for, and we basically are, we have to grant it to them. So in this case, they're looking at height, and open yard the site is pretty restricted. And
Gotcha. So, like the 10-foot plate height for each 400 square foot studio unit, that's the concession that you're asking for?
Well, ultimately, again, that there's always a question, as Barbara will agree, whether it's a concession or a waiver, because this is a, state bonus density law. But we are, what I think we wanted to do initially is to keep this at the 60 feet, which theoretically then, if we did, we don't need a waiver or a concession as long as findings are made relative to exceeding the 48-foot height limit in the central business district for AUDs. So, again, our experience, and, I was reminded this again just the other day, we were going through a project that's under construction, and the ceiling height is so important for these small units. Would 9'8" work? Would 9'6" work? Probably, it would. So we're going to be able to look at that. But that's the first out of the box. That's what we've shown is 10-foot ceilings.
Gotcha. So it would be 48 feet, and forgive me for being redundant.
Yeah.
And so we're asking for a 12-foot concession, right?
Well, or in this case, if I keep the building to 60 feet, then I'm not looking for a waiver or concession relative to the charter height limit, but we would need the planning commission, to Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, we need the planning commission to deem it a community priority in order to go to the 60 feet. So if that didn't happen, then we would use a waiver or concession for going over the 48 feet.
And then, so, and then there's that waiver of open yard, but again, we're not supposed to talk about anything, but I mean, we're going to have these 40 residential units. So, has there been any exploration as to like gathering areas? Because, Mr. Cornell, you've brought in other projects where there's more exploration with outdoor spaces, and I understand it's not required, but I'm just kind of curious. maybe I shouldn't be asking that
Well,
question.
no, it's okay. I mean, we've really been thinking about these as being downtown workforce units where you're not providing those amenities necessarily, where, we're relatively close to parks and open space. The one good thing that we've got is this little space right here where the tree is, which certainly is going to help, but, we have not provided, actual space for outdoor living for the residents other than the small little, balcony elements that we've got in the design.
Okay, and then if I got it right, I understand you guys are in the storage part of the building. You're going to do this massive basement, right, to get that extra story of storage, correct? Now, just curious, this is a business venture, and have you guys, even though it's not required, have you guys explored making that rentable parking space, or making underground parking at the apartment building with the 40 units that you could be renting to the tenants?
We haven't explored it in detail. We've looked at possibly, part of the storage business being car storage. And that's still a possibility. And then, tenants can rent spaces.
Yeah.
They would be premium spaces, though. That's the challenge, because they'd be conditioned in a controlled environment. The answer is yes, but it might not be appropriate for the goal of that housing, which is keep rents as low as possible.
And maybe I should be clear, especially for the audience, the AB 2097 is that 500-foot radius around the bus stop, which is obviously a block away from here, and it allows us to not provide parking for these residential units. So we are taking advantage of that state law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the rents is, just to reinforce what Greg's saying, because we've talked about this, the rents will reflect the fact that you're not paying for parking.
That's right. I mean, our projected rents are 25% below other new studios in downtown. That's what we are projecting. So they are mostly market rate, but because of the size and because there's not a lot of amenities in the building, we feel like we're going to get a lower rent, and we're okay with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Sofrin. Member Black, any questions?
I want to ask you, Bob, about this green wall. So you're just anticipating that the ivy is just going to grow up the wall, right? We've already sort of started to begin to talk about that, right? There's not going to be any green wall structure for it to adhere to or anything like that?
We discussed having a green screen,
Yeah.
but the ivy will adhere on its own quite well.
Do you anticipate any maintenance challenges when you've got a 40-foot high green wall?
Yes, we have.
You're going to need scaffolding to get at it.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's going to require some specialty work.
I guess my other
Pardon the
question.
interruption, just a reminder to speak into your microphones, please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You have commented, though, Bob, on the ivy not requiring a lot of, that was one of your reasons for the ivy?
Yeah, the ivy, for a good amount of time, will, maintain essentially a flatness against the wall. Eventually, it does mature and starts to grow outward, and at that point, it's going to need to be controlled. I couldn't think of another vine that would do what the ivy will do and maintain that flatness for as long as it will.
Not ficus
Not ficus, no.
on a masonry wall.
No, and you've probably seen this too, ficus gets up to about 6 or 8 or 10 feet and gets so heavy that it just peels itself off.
Can't do that, sure.
And, to prevent that, it would have to be sheared probably every 3 years just to keep it flat. And still, I don't know if you could count on it adhering at 40 feet tall.
I understand. I guess my question too is, have you ever seen a building this large completely covered in vines?
No, I have not.
I have not either. But at the same time, you're confident it will work. Well, working is one thing, and just being aesthetically appealing is another, especially in the, adjacent to the downtown historic district. I'm just trying to imagine what that's going to look like.
Well, it's going to be strange looking because we don't have anything like it downtown. One of the things I appreciate about the ivy is that it keeps its foliage essentially from top to bottom. It tends to grow toward the sun, but it doesn't lose its lower leaves like a lot of vines do. So it just, and we've been reading about it, all of us, and, ivy seems to be the way to go from, several different documents that we've been able to access.
I think there are some examples of very tall buildings that have these green walls. I mean, I brought, that's like, one little example that I brought, but, Bob and I have been talking about the idea of mixing plants, which is why I like the idea of the trumpet vines coming from above, because
City TV, please zoom in. Thank you.
these green walls really are most beautiful when they do sort of intermix with with multiple plants instead of just being a single plant. But I think there are lots of examples out there where, this is happening, and it actually is a very pleasing, attractive condition.
I guess that'd be my only questions. Thank you.
Well, I detect you moving into comments, Mr. Black, so why don't you just continue with comments? Oh, certainly, and then I have a couple. Go ahead.
Just one more question. For clarity, I think, did I hear something where like the apartment building has to be, is it actually going to be a separate property from the storage unit? So we're looking at two different properties?
Yes. Yeah, we're proposing that we are going to be putting a property line basically where we show that match line.
Or a condo map. It might not be
Yeah, actually a separate
physical lot
parcel.
line, but it might be a condo split. Yep. And that leaves, that storage entirely mid-block, so no frontage on any streets. It's got buildings on all sides, smack dab in the middle.
Okay, thanks.
Chair Whalen, I would recommend that you finish out your questions. Since this is a pre-application, when we move into comments, we're going to have each board member individually say their comments, and that will be reflected in the minutes.
Thank you for that reminder. If Mr. Six, did you have another question?
I have some additional questions, yeah. So if I understand, this is a question to staff, so with these two concessions, height and open space, it does not need to go to Planning Commission, correct?
No, it'll need to go to the planning commission because it's the storage is commercial square footage, so it's exceeding 10,000 square feet. So we'll be going to the planning commission because of that.
Okay, very good. And then and I know you're talking economics here, but was a second basement considered for going and diminishing the visual impact above grade of the storage unit?
We did not seriously consider a second level of basement. Our water table is unclear to me exactly. I know that there were borings taken and they hit water at 20 feet, but after some time it raised to 11 or 12. So I don't know if that means that the water table is 11 feet or 20 feet, but I'm concerned that if we went any deeper, we would be in the water.
But it hasn't been completely
100%
verified?
verified. I
thank
sent
you.
an email this morning and I did not get a response.
Okay, and then we talk about the division line between the residential and the commercial. It doesn't mean that that could not, given if there's an opportunity to reduce the storage, self-storage element of those two properties, that match line could move up sheet, correct?
It could.
All right,
I
thank
don't know
you.
if he'll let me move it, but.
All right, thank you.
All right then. For my own questions, Mr. Wright, a couple of clarifications for me. If I understand you correctly in your presentation, you bought a portion of the telephone building, right? And the proposed development is financially linked to developing the telephone building, right? So these are almost inseparable elements, right? Thank you. The next question, is this alleyway that you mentioned public or private?
Private.
It's private. And that is how so bikes are going to have access to this private alleyway, right?
Correct.
Which now is sort of fence and lock control.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all.
I'll just elaborate on that a little bit. Brian alluded to an HLC hearing that we had last week, where we had the ADA improvements approved. Part of that was also access control. So there will be, keypad type digital access control so that we can allow people in there.
Well, you've answered my next question. So the access to the storage is really through that alleyway, right?
Correct.
It looks like there's a door down there,
Yes.
but there's really only one door into the storage building?
That's correct. It's from the rear, from that
the rear.
alleyway. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I think, Ms. Ernst, that concludes our questions, and we can move on to comments.
That's correct, and I would just remind the board to summarize and be concise in your comments, since each of your comments will be individually included in the minutes. There's no motion required since this is a pre-application, so just reminder to be succinct in your comments. Thank you.
Well, that's a modest relief. So, Mr. Six, let's start with your comments.
I'll try to be a lot more brief than I was on the Macy's project. So, I understand that the size of this project, especially the self-storage, is generated by economics. But economics is an immediate short-term issue for the developer. This structure that we will see and experience will be here for at least 50 to 100 years. I don't see how I can accept this kind of project with the rationale of the economics of the immediate development. So, with that said, I think there should be a radical reduction of the storage unit component of this. I think it is extremely problematic that the footprint reaches out to only 3 feet on one side, 5 feet on the other, and there is no ability to have relief on the front street except for 2 feet or whatever. I think it is extremely overbuilt footprint-wise and height-wise. I cannot accept it at the mass that it is, and I cannot accept that it has the rationale that it's due to economics. I think, as in previous projects from Mr. Wright's, the space around the building is extremely limited. There's no opportunity for significant trees, either in the front, along De La Guerra or along the sides. There needs to be indents for significant landscape to the ground. I do not have any faith that this green wall in this extent and size will be successful. I see a tremendous amount of risks in that and opportunity for failures. So I think that there needs to be a lot of rethinking and a radical reduction of the project.
Thank you. Member Black, give us your comments, please.
I would have to agree with Mr. Six's comments, too. Just going out to the site and standing on the sidewalk and trying to imagine a 60-foot mass towering above the sidewalk just was, for me, very troubling. When I looked at the other buildings on West De La Guerra, they were either one-story buildings or across the street at De La Guerra and Chapala, and then I believe the one across the street, and perhaps the one Mr. Cannell office designed, but at least they were stepped. I think at the street, most of them were like at 3 stories, and then they stepped back up to whatever the ultimate height was. But this, the fact that there's really massing-wise, there's no step back at all, and it's right at the sidewalk. I think it's just very troubling for me. And I would agree with Mr. Six's comments about the self-storage structure being covered in green. I just think ultimately, well, one, just from an aesthetic perspective, I'm just not convinced that this is something that's going to be appealing, particularly in this neighborhood and adjacent to the historic district. And I just find it troubling as well. Those are my comments.
Very good. Thank you, Member Black. Member Soffrin, your comments, please.
I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Six and Commissioner Black. I think that this project is absurd as it's been presented. I think it looks like something like a Holiday Inn that I'd see at Disneyland, trying to conceal a parking garage. And this is the wrong place to put this. And I'm trying to be polite, but I think that you guys came here and you figured out the maximum that you could do with what you could build, and you intentionally came here with that plan so we could tell you to push it down a little bit. And you'll do that, but I'm surprised at this, I'm sure you'll come back with a better version.
Thank you. And as for my own comments, first on that point, I would commendations for achieving such a project, 40 small units and storage. I think as a developer, you should be proud of what you've achieved here. But on the other hand, I don't feel that it fits in our city. The bike storage, for me personally, is completely wrong and would seem to be even dangerous to late at night, putting my bike back and trying to navigate around. Seems to me the bike storage entry should be on De La Guerra because that's your target. I lived in these small places myself in architecture school, and when I first moved to Santa Barbara, I don't have any trouble with those sizes. I think that's a very inventive way to go. However, the massing up on De La Guerra Street is totally inappropriate. I feel that it should set back. The tower that Mr. Cornell mentioned does need more work, and I thank you for offering that will change. Perhaps the main entry has more expression as the telephone building does. I keep coming back to the telephone building as a singular, well, I think Nicole Hernandez said there are 2 Plateresque buildings, and this one is remarkable. I hope you achieve some of your development goals with it, but a highly decorated entryway is emblematic of a Plateresque style. If you are trying to relate to that, I would encourage you to express each floor level as that building does, perhaps a different ground floor height, which I think you do, but even perhaps some arches at the ground floor, something to relate this as a Baby Bell telephone building, if you will. The design, pardon me? The design in general presents a harmonious character with the exception of the storage building. I agree with the others. I just don't think it's going to work. I would, if you are going to go through with it, it seems to me that you would have to use green tinted concrete block to mitigate those years between planting and full lushness, if you will. And ivy walls like this come with a problem that I knew at the university, where they're wonderful homes for rodents and creatures that you really don't want to live with. So, and I'm sure you're aware of that too. It doesn't seem like there's adequate planting area for the walkway, the plantings, the trees, very, very thin presentation of those elements. Also, its close proximity and view from Chapala being the dividing line of El Pueblo Viejo, it seems to me out of character. And even if it were concrete block, it could express some modulation that, again, related to the telephone building, rather than trying to just erase it out with a green wall. Seems like a very thin premise. There is no usable, functional, common, or private space. When you have these very, very small units, even though you're allowed that exemption, it doesn't seem to me to have fundamentally livable, habitable living and dwelling spaces. Let's see. And to our planner, comments to the adjacent historic buildings. We struggled over this definition of what balance is. I don't think the storage building, well, apart from the tower, which does tend to try to balance historic resources nearby, the storage building fails in that regard and doesn't make any contextual balancing towards the adjacent home buildings. Well,
Can I ask some questions?
Certainly. Did we fulfill our duties there, Ms. Ernst?
Thank you, and if you're allowing the applicant to ask questions, that would be in the chair's discretion.
Certainly, I'll allow it. Mr. Cornell?
So we came to you with this concept, and I appreciate your frankness. As I indicated at the very beginning, my inclination was not to create, faux openings on this building, but it sounds like that would be assuming we're going to continue to pursue this notion of this storage that works with the old building and does help to economically deal with the renovation of that historic building. Would the board's preference be for me to make it create faux openings and make it look like it's a phone building, as opposed to the opportunity to create this living wall that is mid-block and would just be seen as green?
Mr. Six, you have a comment, Mr. Six?
I think the conversation first has to start with some significant setbacks of the height. And, right now you've got straight up walls all the way. And to put you can't do anything, I think, meaningful with straight up walls. There's got to be some modulation, some ins and outs, some vertical expressions and, forms and so forth that could be very, you don't have to have faux with that. some of those modulations could be filled with these vines. But, you know, we've got to have, first of all, we have to have a canvas that is modulated enough to start thinking about shapes and forms and elements.
Are there other responses from board members?
I think if I were to kind of piggyback Commissioner Six, I think, yeah, I just think that like this green vine structure, I mean, okay, we build it now. What does it look like 10 years from now? What does it look like 20 years from now? Like this is a long-term consequence. And, you know, you've chosen to purchase a property and develop it. And that's sensitive area that's close to, you know, there's a lot of people here. And I think, yeah, I don't have any faith in the vines being a long-term solution. So if you're asking, I think, yeah, articulating, maybe creating some openings, you know, making it seem as if this building maybe was here a little bit longer, has another purpose, would be a way to approach it. But I don't want to tell you how to design. You certainly don't need me to do that.
Well, no, that's why we're here. Again, this is concept, and I confess, for me, I felt that, you know, this could be a mid-block, a nice mid-block solution where to the average person, you're not seeing anything but green, and that it does have layers of trees along with the vining. But, you know, what I'm hearing from you is no, make it look like a piece of architecture. And I guess we just have to deal with the practical realities of what's inside.
Or could you mix it up and have, like with the articulation, so you still have many large green elements, like Commissioner Black brought up, has anyone ever seen a building this big covered in ivy?
Like the image that I shared with you.
But this big? Like that
Yeah.
image doesn't show a structure this large.
Well, I mean, I
This is
could,
one story.
I could bring to you a 40-story building that's covered in green. So, sure, there are large buildings that have done this all around the world, but I'm just looking for direction. And again, it sounds like no, don't try to create a living wall or a green building.
All right, so for constructive feedback, to be very constructive, I think, okay, what if my constructive feedback would be, you've got this, you know, this white stucco front apartment building, then maybe there's some articulation where you've got some large green facades, but then you tear back and maybe you go back to the stucco again. So it looks like maybe there's a few buildings, even though there are not a few buildings. And it does break that up and confuse the eye of the onlooker who's just walking past.
Well, and I would caution you, Mr. Kernal, from drawing conclusions. I think the board members, based upon what was presented, did not have a good reaction. What I hear from you is that you're thinking that that means I should do X. And as they say in the theater, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. So I would have to see a proposal before I were to give you my reaction, whether it was a building or some alternate green plan.
I'm not hearing no to the green, I'm hearing no to the form.
Well, like in
if I may.
these photographs, the architecture is reading through the greenery. It's not just solid green. So, you know, if that suggests anything, you know, that
No,
in both
that's-
photographs.
We need to work together, and I'm not asking you to design it. I'm just looking for parameters, and you've all been very clear.
I think we're dubious about the success of an ivy wall, and unless there is a standard or some example or some proof that this is a sound way to go, I think we'd be willing to listen to that. But as it's proposed, the board finds objections to that.
That's clear. Thank you.
Anything else down here?
Well, we've been talking about the green wall. Sorry. We've been talking about the green wall, so are we clear about, I guess, with our comments about the The residential
Yeah, I
portion of
think-
this?
I think
We're
you were-
clear, huh?
I think you were clear.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Ms. Ernst, anything else?
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln?
We would
how
just need
did you-
to adjourn the meeting.
Like the play. Yes.
We're all good.
And with that, I will adjourn the City of Santa Barbara's Architectural Board of Review for Tuesday, April 2nd. Thank you.